Hey, Pete, how are you?
Good.
Good.
So, Dave from Dog Eat Dog. Let's start. Where'd you grow up, man? And how'd you get into hardcore?
Well, I'm a Jersey boy, born and raised. Grew up in Bergen County.
All right.
And basically, I mean, I've been into heavy metal, rock and roll, since I was a young kid, listening to Kiss and Iron Maiden, Black Sabbath, and really started in like a real roots of heavy metal until I was about 15. And around 15 is when I started to listen to, I think the album that really kind of pushed me into another realm of music appreciation was SOD, Speak English or Die. When I heard that record, I started becoming more into a faster, heavier, hardcore sound, and it was like the gates, opened, and I started listening to anything I could that was fast. So DRI, Crumbsuckers, Agnostic Front, all those bands around 85 for me was when I started going to hardcore shows, and Corrosion of Conformity started really getting into that, and then it was like no turning back. I was still into thrash metal and things, but I mean really punk and hardcore were really ruling for me in my mid-teenage years, and still love all those records today. I kind of never really grew up out of the 80s, so I still continue to listen to Bad Brains and all those great records from the 80s. I still think they're better than anything coming out today.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. Do you remember your first hardcore show?
Definitely was Corrosion of Conformity on the Technocracy tour. Before that, I didn't drive at that point, so there was no real way for me to get to any shows. And like I said, I was really into metal, but I was dating a girl who was going to the show, and she's like, "Let's go." And when I saw Corrosion of Conformity, they just blew my mind. I mean, I've been listening to the records and everything, so I was familiar with all the bands and the music. I just didn't do the live thing. And then once I saw that show and I was up on stage and stage diving and meeting the band afterwards, I was like, this is so different than what I was used to. I love this, and this is what I want to do. And I was in bands at that point, but I wasn't playing that kind of music. But as soon as I saw them play, everything changed for me, and it wasn't long after before I joined Mucky Pup and started actually playing shows with these bands, my idols.
Right. Nice. Who named the band Dog Eat Dog?
Well, when we started, we really couldn't agree on a name, so we played a few shows under a bunch of different names. F Troop, B-Load, like just every day it was a different name. And we were on the boardwalk one day walking, and my girlfriend saw a sign and said Doghouse, and she said, "What about Doghouse?" And just saying anything just to try and find a word. And then I can't remember exactly, but I was with Sean Kilkenny, my guitar player, and he was like, "What about Dog Eat Dog?" Because he's like a major AC/DC fan. And I was like a huge Adam and the Ants fan. So like we were both like, yeah, Dog Eat Dog, that sounds good. And we told the rest of the guys in the band, and everybody said, yeah, that somehow it feels right for us and what we're doing. And we just kept it. So it was one of those things where after 100 tries, the right name just popped up. But what's interesting is that back then, we're talking about, this was 1990, there was no internet yet. So basically, if you wanted a band name, you went to Tower Records and you looked through, and if you didn't see a band with that name, it was, free reign on that, But once we got signed to Roadrunner in 93, all of a sudden, all these bands named Dog Eat Dog started contacting Roadrunner and saying, hey, we're this band for a longer time, and blah, blah, blah. There was a band from Canada called Dog Eat Dog. I mean, we didn't know any of this. But there was a band from Finland called Dog Eat Dog, so they all came out. But because we were signed and we were on a bigger label, everybody else had to change their name. So, oh well.
You won.
We won.
Yeah. Do you think growing up in Jersey influenced your sound at all?
I do. I mean, I think because we live so close to New York, we were very aware of, New York hardcore sound. Biohazard were really close friends of ours at the time, and we knew what was going on. Life of Agony we were coming up with, some other bands, but like I guess having like a Jersey upbringing was a little more suburban, so it was a little more like skateboard influenced, and of course the inclusion of a saxophone was something that wasn't a plan but really defined our sound. So that combination of rap music, saxophone, and skate rock kind of all came together to kind of form something that was different at the time. And you could really feel it back in the early 90s when we would play gigs. This is when we were a demo band. It was just a lot of buzz and a lot of energy around what we were doing. People were packing the clubs every night. I mean, it's why we got signed fairly quickly, because at the time there wasn't another band that really sounded that way. But I think New Jersey scene at that time was really thriving. There was like, I don't know if you remember Studio One and the Pipeline.
Of course,
yeah. I mean, those clubs were, there was a real scene going on there. And even before that, the China Club in Hillsdale. And that's where we were really born out of. So whatever was going on at the time, we were just kind of a mix of all that stuff.
Nice. All right. And Doggy Dog was born out of Mucky Pup, right?
That's right.
And so how did you guys all meet each other first?
Well, I was from a different town. Mucky Pup came from Bergenfield. So basically, in 1988, I got a call saying, hey, we saw you play at a club and we're interested in having you try out. And they picked me up and I met the guys in the band and I played 2 or 3 songs and they said, okay, you're in the band. It was that quick. And when I joined the band, I realized John Connor, the singer of Doggy Dog, was really good friends with the guys in Mucky Pup, which I didn't know, but I had known John Connor from the club scene, China Club days, and all of a sudden, like, our worlds kind of came back together. So I met, Sean for the first time and our core group of friends in Mucky Pup. Then we started touring Europe, and we brought John Connor with us as we call him our roadie, but I mean, he really had no musical experience. He was just there as like a helping hand, whatever we needed, filming, hanging the banner, or getting beer for the band, whatever it may be. And he would come out and he would sing one song before the Mucky Pup show. Like, we would start with like an intro, and we would do usually like a Murphy's Law cover to start the show. And so essentially it was me and Sean with John singing, and it sounded really good, and the crowd were going kind of crazy with John's vocal. And I spent 3 years in Mucky Pup, and then I really kind of felt in 1990 like I wanted to do something on my own, and I wanted to play music that was a little harder, and I wanted to have a little bit more musical freedom. And it just seemed natural to say, hey, John, you're already kind of singing with us. You be the singer. Sean, you come with me, and we'll just kind of take what we got here and just keep going. So Dan Nastasi, the guitar player of Mucky Pup at the time, he had quit and he had joined Murphy's Law, and he heard what we were doing and liked the sound and said, hey, I'd love to jam with you guys. And then he joined, and, kind of Doggy Dog was born essentially out of everybody in Mucky Pup except the singer.
Okay. Nice.
So we kind of just,
what were we going to say?
No, we just kind of like sidestepped and formed a new band. It wasn't really like having to like go out and meet new people and try out members. It was just like friends doing it.
Oh, okay. Right on. Awesome. What was recording All Borough Kings like?
Well, we recorded in Connecticut. So every day we got up and we drove about 45 minutes, an hour away into a studio in Connecticut that was like in the woods with Jason Corsaro, our producer. And we had about 3 weeks in the studio to record it. All of the songs had been essentially written already, so there wasn't any type of working in the studio to try to figure out what to do. It was like we were pretty prepared on that record to just go in and record it. But we didn't have a ton of experience doing it, so we kind of just left it up to the producer. And you know what, the sound, he had just come off working on the Soundgarden Spoonman album, whatever one that was, I can't remember, but so he was doing some like kind of dirty production for them, and he wanted to incorporate that into our sound as well. So we purposely didn't go for a very polished sound. We went for a kind of very natural roots sound on that record, and it was a pretty easy process. I mean, like I said, everything was kind of done. We just went in and did our jobs and recorded and had fun, and you know, we never knew that this is going to be a hit record or it's going to be successful. We just said it sounds pretty good for what it is. And you know, when we heard No Fronts and Who's the King, you could feel there was some energy and excitement around it. You know, we all liked it, and the record label seemed pretty pumped. But you know, when it came out, I don't think anybody expected it to kind of catch on like it did. It was pretty surprising to everybody. I think when you go and you make a record, nobody can plan for a hit. You know, you just write a good song, something you like, and then, you know, it just gets out there, and it is. But we had, you know, huge support from MTV in Europe, and they were just rotating Who's the King and No Fronts, you know, on the hour, you know, and it just, our fan base just grew by the day. It was crazy.
Oh, yeah. That shit blew up, man.
Yeah, it did. I mean, like, we didn't expect it. We just wanted to have fun and play some music, but it definitely gave us a career.
Yeah. Well, who came up with the saxophone ideas on that?
Well, the sax was kind of an accident. We have a friend named Kevin Riley, and he was just hanging out, and one day we were rehearsing, and he brought his saxophone over for one part we thought might sound good with a sax. So he came over and he played it, and everybody kind of smiled and said that was really cool. That, you know, not something we wanted. But then, you know, we said, well, if that worked, let's try sax on this part. You know, let's try sax on that part. And all of a sudden it was like, this sax thing is kind of working, and people seem to really like it. This is, you know, obviously we're still a demo band at this point. So, you know, we were feeling like we can experiment any way we want. We can do whatever we want. There's no rules. Why not put a saxophone in? But by the time we got to the kind of, you know, signed stage and recording records, it had now become like a defining sound of the band. And honestly, we tried in the late 90s to get rid of the saxophone and just play as a rock band. And people kept saying, hey, where's the sax? Where's the sax? And we were like, nah, we're trying to do, like, you know, the Rage Against the Machine, you know, style, you know, without that kind of stuff. And it got to the point where promoters were telling our booking agent, you know, if they don't have the sax, we're not going to book them.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, the sax is that important that, you know, we had no choice if we wanted to continue playing to keep the sax in the band. So, you know, now we've got full-on sax. We do everything the proper way. The band sounds, you know, the best it ever did these days.
Yeah. Well, what influenced that album overall? Like, what inspired most of the songs on Marlboro Kings?
Well, at the time, I mean, we're huge into Bad Brains, really, you know. We had just finished a tour with Bad Brains in Europe in '93. Our first tour of Europe was opening for Bad Brains, and we kind of, between Bad Brains, Murphy's Law, Beastie Boys, Chili Peppers, I mean, these were bands that we were, you know, really listening to a lot at the time. So I'm sure a lot of that, you know, creeped into our music. But with Marlboro Kings, I mean, we were all writing. Anybody could come up with anything. There was no, like, one central writer. I mean, I wrote a lot of riffs. Danny wrote a lot of riffs. Even John, the singer, came up with horn parts and things. So, like, it really was more of a collective, you know, input to the record. So I think everybody in Dog Eat Dog has different musical tastes. So, like, I really am heavy into hardcore and, you know, metal, and I always wanted to play heavier and faster. But John is really into hip hop. So he really brought that element in. And then you got Dan Nastasi, who was definitely into his own thing. Like he just brought like a pop element to it, where, you know, catchy parts and catchy vocal parts and stuff. He really brought that. And Sean, the guitar player, heavily into AC/DC. He really just brought the like heavy rhythm guitar in. So I think really Dog Eat Dog is that perfect example of when you bring 4 or 5 guys who all have slightly different musical influences together, and they're allowed to have a voice, you get something like what we put out.
Right on. And that first overseas tour, you said you opened for Bad Brains. You played with 7 Seconds and Big Drill Car, right? How did those go?
That's right. So, yeah, the first half of the tour was Bad Brains, and then the second half of the tour was switching to 7 Seconds and Big Drill Car. And, you know, again, those were 2 bands that we loved at the time, so we couldn't believe our luck when we were going to Europe for the first time and playing with, like, 3 bands that, like, are among our favorites. So it was really incredible. We were treated really, really well. And because of the Bad Brains thing, when we came home from the tour and we went into the studio to record Allboro Kings, we asked Daryl Jennifer, the bass player of Bad Brains, to sing on the record. And he did, because he had just spent, you know, a week on the road with us or whatever it was, 10 days on the road. And so he was happy to do it. And that added a huge element to Who's the King, his reggae vocal breakdown. And, you know, we weren't really, we didn't really know Big Drill Car or 7 Seconds prior, but they treated us really well and, you know, stayed friendly with Big Drill Car after that. So, you know, we really started off well, and then the next tour was the big one, Biohazard and Downset in '94, and that was like a 2-month tour in Europe, and that's really what broke us. And we had been friends with Biohazard for so long when they were a demo band, and they would open for Mucky Pup. So they kind of returned the favor for Dog Eat Dog and said, we're going to take you guys on the road. And that was really the beginning of, you know, without that tour, I don't know if anything would have happened, but that tour propelled the record sales and the video, and, you know, all of Europe got to see us play.
Right. Well, I know, you know, you guys were on MTV pretty early. What changed for you guys when that happened?
Well, no band on Roadrunner prior to us had that kind of MTV push. So for the label, they were like into something new, like, okay, now we've got a band with like real commercial potential. So when that happens, you know, of course, the label's going to see dollar signs, and they're going to want to jump on that and continue that. And so a lot of things change because you know how it is when you love a band and you feel very close to them as an underground band, and they're mine and they're personal, and you know, then you start seeing them on MTV and the cover of magazines, and then you feel like, you know, they're too commercial now. Everybody knows them. We all been through that with bands. You know, I don't want to be that guy, but you don't have any control over it. It's the label that's like putting money into you and getting promotion and from every way. And, you know, we're in like teeny bopper magazines in Europe in the 90s. It was not something that we had any control of or we would have agreed to do, but, you know, the label felt that it was important to push this thing in every direction. So what happens is you end up losing your core audience, your core fans, and you end up getting these, you know, teenage girls instead who, you know, will forget about you a year later.
Right.
And so in 96, when we came out with the Play Games record, it went very commercial, very teeny bopper, very Bravo magazine for us. And I think we were really popular, but without our core audience. And then what happened was when that smoke faded in, let's say, 97, we were left with basically no fan base anymore.
Right.
And
the girls did come.
The girls came. I mean, there were times where it was like everybody in the front was a teenage girl instead of, you know, hardcore kids. And it was a really weird thing. I mean, you know, there were screaming girls. Like, we couldn't even get out of the building without, like, security holding the girls back. It was like the Beatles shit. Obviously not what we originally intended, but that's what MTV does.
Right. Yeah. Well, what about filming the video for Who's the King? I know a lot of New York neighborhoods were in there, like the Brooklyn Banks, Chinatown, Washington Square Park.
Yeah.
How did you guys go about doing that?
That was really just like, hey, where do you guys normally hang out? Let's make a video, So it was really more like John and Sean were really into skating, and that's where they would skate. So we just said, let's go to Brooklyn Banks where they would normally be on a weekend skating, and let's film it. So Who's the King video was not, let's say, a heavily scripted or thought out video. It was more just a day in the life of Doggy Dog. Put your guitar on and let's just shoot all day. Play basketball, skateboard, rock out. Let's have some fun. And that was it. It was really like filming it was not a, we just kind of found the locations we thought looked good and set up and just did what we do. It was not a heavy production. It was a light crew. I don't even remember there being any lighting of any type. It was just a camera and a guy and us. And it came out exactly like what we wanted. Again, it didn't look like to us like something that would be played on MTV. It just seemed like just something we could, show our friends or use as a promotional tool. But it became a kind of minor classic.
Did you guys block off the street for that at all?
From what I can remember, there was no blocking off of anything. Okay. It was just put your guitar on, illegal. I don't think there were any permits of any type. I think we just kind of went out and did it guerrilla style.
Well, all right. That's the way to do it.
Yeah.
And Paris Mayhew, Cro-Mags joined the band for a period. How was the band's energy when he joined?
Well, we were huge, and still are and always have been huge fans of the Cro-Mags. So, like, Sean had known him pretty well, a little better than me, and Dan Nastasi couldn't do the Biohazard tour in '94 because it was too long. It was like 2 months, and he had a business to run. He had a family. He just wasn't able to make that commitment. So we needed to find a fill-in guitar player, and Sean asked Paris to do it, and Paris was really close friends with Biohazard, so it just made sense, like, no problem. I'll hang out with my friends, and Drew Stone was on the bus with us, too. He was filming everything, and Paris and Drew were, worked together, so it was like, just kind of like Paris was just part of the family already, so it was just like, hey, you want to bring your guitar and just do the gig? And he was like, yeah, no problem. So, we had him in the band for 2 months, and I think we did a couple other small tours with him, a couple in the U.S., and then basically we decided we need to, have a permanent guitar player, so we ended up getting another guitar player. But, the time we had with him was, it was an honor to just stand on stage and be like, I'm standing next to Paris, one day I'm, looking at my Age of Quarrel record and loving it, and next thing I know, I'm on stage with the guy. That's the way my life has been. It's just all these bands I used to just listen to records of, I ended up meeting and playing with, and it's just been incredible.
Nice. And I know you guys tour with Bad Brains a lot. You got any good HR stories?
Well, when we toured with Bad Brains first in '93, HR wasn't the vocalist, it was Israel.
Okay.
So Israel was very down to earth and, not crazy in any way. So the Bad Brains were on a pretty, laid back, mellow, vibe. Mackie was playing drums at the time as well. And then we played with Bad Brains later on again with HR. And if you've seen the video Finding Joseph documentary, have you seen it?
Yeah, it's good.
Well, there's a part in there where Bad Brains go to Japan, and we were on that show.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, we played directly before them on that Japanese part. Oh. So when he came out and he was smiling and he had like a bird cage.
Yeah.
Right, we were on that show, so we saw him. So, like, we went on at like 3:30, 4 in the morning. Bad Brains went on at like 4 or 5 in the morning. I mean, it was unbelievable. It was an all-night thing. So, like, by the time Bad Brains finished, the sun was up, and we all went back to the hotel and sat in the lobby and drank until noon. So we were hammered, and then the elevator opens, and HR walks out of the elevator at like noon smiling, and I was drunk and I ran over and I was like, I got to get a picture with you. So I have this incredible picture of me and HR. He's smiling and I'm drunk as hell. So no one's ever seen the picture because I look horrible in it, but it was a great moment to talk to him, and he was in a really good mood. He was really happy. So, that was really, unfortunately, when we toured with them, I wasn't able to spend a lot of time with HR, but I did get to know Daryl and Doc really well, and Mackie as well.
Right. Yeah, I met HR once. He's definitely a hardcore relic.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No doubt about it.
What was your favorite club to play, you think?
I mean, in the early days in Jersey, like I said, Studio One and Pipeline, back and forth between those two were really our home. That was where, all our friends would come out to. The energy was always there. We used to love Bond Street Cafe in the city. Mm-hmm. That one did really well for us. Anytime we would play there, we would pack it out. And then, stuff like Coney Island High in the mid-'90s was good. CB's, of course, was great. Continental, we would play every now and then. We did the circuit. There were so many great places to play. The Marquee, on 21st Street back then. I always had good bands playing. Once we went to Europe, everything in Europe is pretty great, to be honest with you. All the clubs were packed, and the people are just so supportive of the kind of music, hardcore, punk, metal, doesn't matter. People love it over there. So really in Germany, Holland, and Belgium were really our main fan base. Yeah.
What do you think your most notorious, craziest show was out of all those clubs? CBGB's, Pipeline, Coney Island High. Any standout?
Well, definitely the Studio One gigs were pretty standout because we would end up at first playing with Nuclear Assault and DRI and bands that we just loved, and then we got so popular that we were able to headline Studio One and pack it. So we went from kind of being the opener to being the headliner there, and those shows were always really special. Pipeline was much smaller, but it was a great place to just bring all your friends together. I can't remember off the top of my head. We definitely did some incredible shows with Biohazard, so I have to say they were probably the best band for us to play with. But if I had to make a list of every band we've shared the stage with over the years, it would be pretty incredible list with some huge names on it, like Kiss and Ozzy and Rage Against the Machine and God, you name it, every hardcore band, Gnostic, Sick of It All. We still continue to play with these bands. Life of Agony we basically came up with at Neabore. And so, it's just been incredible how many bands, Ramones, everybody, it's just pretty, I'm still amazed that I actually have done all this stuff. It's just been a huge, 28-year journey.
How was playing with the Ramones? How did you perceive them?
Well, that was in Belgium in '95.
Wow.
And Joey was kind of sickly. I remember he wasn't walking very well. He had to almost be carried to the stage. Mm-hmm. So I didn't really speak to him at all, but I was backstage and I was hanging in with Johnny. And I had my in with him was the fact that I've been going to horror conventions my whole life since I was a teenager, and he was a major horror and sci-fi collector, and I would see him at the conventions, but I never had the nerve to just go up, or I just didn't want to interrupt him or anything. But when we were backstage at the show, I said, hey, I see you at horror conventions all the time, and I just wanted to talk about movies with you and stuff. So we ended up having a great conversation about movies. And the next time there was a horror convention, I went up to him and I said, hey, Johnny. And he looked at me and he goes, dog eat dog. And I'm like, yep, you got it. And I was so happy. That was one of the greatest moments of my life. So it just, that connection is, again, one of those magic things that I'm just so grateful that I've had this experience, and I was able to and for one moment be almost a peer with these guys, instead of just a fan. So it was really cool.
Yeah, I got stuff signed by him, but I never met him, unfortunately.
Well,
so let's get into horror. What's your top 3 horror movies?
well, people ask me all the time, and it's hard to give you, a definitive, but today I would say Halloween, The Shining, and Suspiria are probably my 3 favorite, but those can be interchanged with The Exorcist, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Evil Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Reanimator. I mean, those are like just the pinnacle for me. But I have to say, definitely Halloween and The Shining were the 2 that really like changed my life and affected my life and really made me love horror, and it scared the absolute shit out of me. So that's, when something has that kind of effect, you don't forget it.
Yeah, those are great. And how big's your horror collection? Huge, from what I see.
Yeah, I've been collecting. I started collecting things, I guess, around 1983. I was reading Fangoria magazine and everything back in the day, and there would be ads that you could clip out for records, and this is some books and things like that. So I started collecting, and every holiday for gifts I would ask for something out of the Fangoria magazine, and then starting in 1985, Fangoria started running horror conventions in New York, and I went to them. And then there you would have almost like a flea market of merchandise, and the celebrities would come, and they never charged for autographs or anything. And, I started my journey, and then, some other horror conventions started up at around that time, late 80s. Mm-hmm. And I would just go to every one, and I would just, basically bring a full wallet and buy whatever I could. And then it just never ended. So, prior to the internet, you actually had to go out and look for this stuff, Right. Once eBay started coming online, and you could buy some hard to find items online, but for the most part, I'm still really into like going out there and finding treasure. It really makes it more satisfying when you actually work for the stuff that you have. So I have a huge collection. I mean, my main focus is movie soundtrack music. I have damn near every horror soundtrack that's been put out or available, at least the originals. I don't go for every reissue that's put out because I already have it, but if the reissue is worth getting or the packaging is beautiful, I'll double dip and get another one. And, some movies, like my favorites, I've bought in every format, from VHS, Laserdisc, DVD, Blu-ray, and I keep them all.
Nice. I remember sneaking into Chiller Theater all the time in the 90s.
Absolutely. I still go to Chiller twice a year unless I'm in Europe. I've only missed it 3 or 4 times ever.
Wow.
Luckily. Yeah. So,
Die hard.
Yeah, well, thankfully, April and October are the Chiller. So October I almost never tour in, so I'm always there for the Halloween. And then April is like hit or miss, so I've missed a few. But this year we got back from Europe in time, so I was there again. But Chiller is like definitely like my home. All my friends, I'm friends with all the vendors and the staff at Chiller. So, it's a really fun place to just go and hang out. It's more than a convention. It's really like a kind of a weekend of little, like almost like a little mini vacation.
Yeah. Do you collect serial killer stuff too, or no?
I mean, I dabble in everything. So I've got like some books about serial killers and like real death photography and, kind of weird stuff like that. But, I don't really glorify serial killers as like idols of mine or anything. I mean, I know a lot of people do, and I certainly can understand the fascination with them, because it's like, how can somebody do what they did? So of course I've read about all of them, but like I said, I guess for me, I'm more into the fictional side of horror. I really like the movies and everything, but I also like the fact that it's not real. And once you get into like the real stuff, it's a little more disturbing than I necessarily need in my life.
It's definitely intense. But I know a lot of people are into collecting all that crazy stuff.
Hey, whatever makes you happy, as long as
right.
you're not hurting anybody, I'm okay with it.
Right on. And how'd you end up doing the Fulci Symphony of Fear tribute album?
Right. Well, that was the first project that I did about Lucio Fulci, which was basically there were two companies. If you know Sean Lewis from Rotten Cotton,
yeah,
his T-shirt company, and then my friend Dacian Alucarda from Blackest Heart Media. And these two guys worked together, and they sold like bootlegs of Lucio films and they, you know, T-shirts and stuff. They were really just two guys that were diehard horror fans, but you know, they were providing a service to people, getting, you know, tapes that were hard to see or T-shirts with, you know, cool movies on them that you wouldn't normally find in a convention or a store. And I was just friendly with them because I was, you know, basically just a person who was buying a lot of stuff at the conventions, and they knew I was in Dog Eat Dog, and we were doing pretty well at the time in the mid-'90s, and they said, hey, we're putting together this compilation record. We've got one guy from Guar. We've got one guy from Ministry. What about you? You want to try a track on it? I said, absolutely, definitely. So at that time, right when that happened, I was in the studio recording a remix of Dog Eat Dog and the RZA Step Right In for the X Games soundtrack. So while I was in the studio doing that, the offer came through, and I said, well, this is perfect timing because I'm already in the studio working. I can bang this track out real quick. And I basically did it in one day, and when I handed it in, they loved it. So that was cool for me because that led me to my next project, which was the soundtrack to Paura Lucio Fulci Remembered Volume 1, which was a documentary, and the guy who directed it, Mike Peronis, called me and said, hey, I heard your track on that record. It's one of my favorite tracks on the Symphony of Fear. I would like to have you record 5 songs for my movie. So I basically jumped at that. He paid for everything, studio time, and it was a great experience, and it came out very well, and I was totally happy with it. And then that led me to what I'm doing now, which is the soundtracks for the Ibon Press comic book company. And they heard that and said, we want to do a soundtrack for our Lucio Fulci zombie comic. And I said, okay, and I did it, and they loved it. And then I did another comic, Bottom Feeder, which is out now. And I'm still in the studio doing extra tracks right now for the zombie comic. They expanded it and made it even bigger than originally planned. So it's going to be my next release, and it's a lot of work, and it came out great. So I'm really excited. In like 2 months, everyone's going to hear my zombie record, and it's some of my best work. I'm really excited.
Nice, man. Awesome. What's your top 3 hardcore bands?
Oh, man, that is a tough question. But there's no doubt Bad Brains, for me, are just huge influence. So I'm going to have to put Bad Brains as my number 1. I'm not going to say SOD, even though that record is everything. It's my favorite record, but they don't really have a lot of albums, and they're more of a side project, and so I'm going to leave them off, but they would be. I'm going to have to say, oh my God, I don't want to leave anybody out. I mean, Murphy's Law had such a huge influence on me, their first album. Would you call them hardcore?
Yeah.
Okay, then I'm going to say Bad Brains, Murphy's Law, and I'm going to have to say Crumbsuckers, because Life of Agony was a life-changing album for me.
Okay, cool. And you guys toured with Biohazard, Agnostic Front, Hatebreed, that 2002 East Pack Resistance tour in Europe. How did that go? It was a huge fest, right?
Yeah, this was not Dog Eat Dog. This was another side project we did called Allboro Kings.
Okay.
So it was essentially half of Mucky Pup and half of Dog Eat Dog doing a record together. And it was one of my favorite records we've ever done. And we were signed to Century Media, and that tour opportunity came up just because it was around the time of the release of our record, and the label knew about the festival, and of course Biohazard knew who we were, so we ended up sharing the bus with Biohazard, and we just got in there. Every night of that tour was like incredible to just hang out with Biohazard, Agnostic, and Hatebreed, and just shoot the shit every night. Was just amazing. You know, it was a great opportunity. I mean, we knew that the band Allboro Kings was just really a side band. We knew it wasn't going to be a career band, so we were just kind of enjoying our one and only European tour, and it was a good one.
Yeah. And was there a lot of violence out there? Obviously there was, you know, in the 90s on the East Coast. But did you see any in Europe?
You're talking about at the shows?
Yeah.
No. I have to say no. One thing about our touring and our entire career, it was always pretty peaceful. I mean, in Europe, I think everybody there is really there to have fun and help each other. If someone gets dropped or anything, you didn't really see a lot of violence. You saw some people with, you know, bloody noses and broken arms every now and then, but it was because they were, you know, jumping off the PA speakers or like doing something crazy. But I never, only once or twice did I witness any kind of fights that had to be broken up. I mean, you know, but normal stuff, nothing extreme. So I have to say, overall, Europe is a pretty loving hardcore community and supportive of each other.
Okay. And why did the band quietly break up in 2004?
Well, again, when we got into this, it was really just supposed to be like a side project. It wasn't meant to be a ongoing band. We made a record, and we toured for that record, and then essentially decided that was the goal, and that's all we really wanted. We had Dog Eat Dog to work on. By 2004, Dog Eat Dog was back in the studio recording another record, and there just wasn't any more time. We played like every club in New York, New Jersey area, and it just seemed like there wasn't any place to go. So I'm not saying we'll never make another record, because honestly, you know, it would be a lot of fun to get back with those guys and bang out some more like hardcore songs. With that band, we were able to get a little faster and play a little more, let's say, less rap and more hardcore, and that's what I was really into. So I really loved the experience of writing and making that record and playing those songs, but you know, it was only meant to be a side project, so that's why it ended.
Okay. And what's next for Dog Eat Dog?
Well, we already started our 2018 tour. We had an unbelievable year in 2017. We played 54 shows in 16 countries and released a new EP called Brand New Breed with 4 songs. Not the heaviest stuff we ever did, but we're really excited about, you know, how we're able to write and record now. We've found a great studio in Switzerland. That's our new home, and we already wrote and recorded more new material, and we just met with a new record label. We're very close to signing a new record deal, and they're going to pay for the rest of our recording. So 2018 looks like 5 or 6 trips to Europe, bunch of big festivals, maybe a re-release of our EP, and continuing to work on our forthcoming record. We will release another record, but probably not until 2019.
Nice. And what do you miss about the 90s hardcore scene?
Say again?
What do you miss about the 90s hardcore scene?
I miss the quality of bands. I really think the music was so good in the mid-90s, especially in Europe. If you look at the Roadrunner roster, when you had just so many good bands, everybody was different and everybody was cool. You had Sepultura, Shelter, you know, Typo Negative, Biohazard, Madball, Downset, you know, and all these, Life of Agony, all these bands were doing what they wanted to do, but it all worked together. And now you have fragments of all that. All these bands are still together and still going, but it doesn't feel like a united scene anymore. It feels like everybody's kind of doing their own thing, which is great. But there was a magic to the mid-90s, especially around 95, right in the heart of the 90s, where, especially in Europe, you know, everybody loved all of those bands and more. I mean, I'm just naming a few. There were so many good bands playing, and I kind of miss that kind of camaraderie between in the scene. It wasn't that the bands don't like each other anymore. They just don't have the opportunity to all play together like that, you know?
Right.
But it's cool because now even, just recently, last year, November, Dog Eat Dog played the Sound of Revolution Festival in Holland with Sick of It All and Cro-Mags.
Nice.
And it was just like such an honor to be like back with these guys, and like everybody still looks good, you know? I mean, nobody looks old, and everybody's still playing great, and the crowds are going crazy. So like, hardcore still lives, and the bands that really meant something to me when I was a teenager, I'm still on stage with these guys, and they're great people. Agnostic Front, I mean, I see, Mike Gallo and Vinny Stigma all the time, and we're about to play with those guys again coming up this summer. So like, if they can keep going and be as good as they are, it gives me hope that we still got plenty of time to do what we do.
Yeah, for sure. And what does hardcore mean to you? Pretty much kind of what you just said, but I mean, is it still a way of life for you?
Well, it's in my roots for sure. I mean, I hardcore gave me an outlet for a lot of, let's say, energy that I had inside that I didn't know what to do with. When I was a teenager, I was a really depressed kid in a lot of ways, and like, had some growing up with some, family problems and stuff. So like having hardcore records like gave me something to really like believe in and share with friends, and I would just, put records on and just destroy my room if I had to, but I was able to do it. And once I started going out like hardcore shows, it was such a great social thing. You'd see your friends and you sweat your ass off in the pit and have such a great time. Even if you ended up with some cuts and bruises, it was just a lot of fun. I've had some close calls. I really should be dead from a broken neck on many occasions from stage diving and hitting the floor. But, I've been allowed to continue, and those songs and the bands, I mean, I was never a straight edge guy, but I listened to a ton of straight edge music, Warzone and Youth of Today, and I'm still seeing these guys, and the guys in Youth of Today are just so incredible. They're healthy and into spreading good vibes, and that all of that just always meant something to me. There was just that scene and and just like, even though the music was aggressive, the vibe was always one of unity and friendship. And so, that has stayed with me my whole life. And that's why I try to be a good person and try and be respectful of other people. And, I still believe in that. And I'm the first guy to knock on another band's dressing room and introduce myself and walk in and say hello and, let's have a beer and, hang out. So I think that's, part of what hardcore meant to me was really a friendship overall and respect.
Yeah, 100%. And do you know Rabies at all?
I met Rabies on many occasions. Mucky Pup used to play with Warzone back in the day, so I couldn't say that I was really good friends. I didn't grow up in Manhattan with him or wherever he was from, but I definitely shared the stage with Rabies, and I definitely have the records and love and respect them, and, rest in peace.
Yeah, I saw Warzone right before Rabies passed, so I was lucky enough to see that. And what about hardcore today? I know you're heading out to the Misfits Suicidal Tendencies Murphy's Law show today, right?
Yeah.
So you're still doing it?
It was like one of those things where it's like I've seen Misfits without Danzig a bunch of times, and I've seen Danzig without the Misfits a bunch of times, but I never saw them together.
Right.
So I kind of felt like this is maybe not the only opportunity, but it's an opportunity. And to have Suicidal, another one of my, that the first Suicidal record is, absolutely one of my 10 favorite records ever, most influential. So like seeing them on the bill, and then Murphy's Law, who are, obviously Jimmy is a great guy and I'm friendly with him. There was every person I know is going. There was just no way I was not going to be able to go to this show. But I'm pretty fundamentally against punk rock being in an arena, because
right.
where I paid $150 for my ticket. I'm not even going to be able to see the people on the stage. I'm so far away. So I'm not that excited about it. And the whole thing about taking your phone and putting it in a bag so you can't take any pictures. It's like, that's so not punk rock to me.
You have to put it in a bag, like at the front?
Yeah. They have like a locking bag system. Everybody who comes in, your phone gets locked up, and then you have to go to a station and unlock it. It's ridiculous.
That's not cool.
No,
that's Glenn Danzig's policy, right?
Yep. So he doesn't want to be photographed. A lot of other bands will say, hey, the policy is there so that the fans actually enjoy the show and don't spend the whole show staring through their phone. But in this case, I have to think that it's really just Danzig's ego fueling this decision. So, a part of me is like, this is kind of ridiculous that people are paying $300 for tickets to stand on the floor for this, but it could be a once in a lifetime experience. And I just wanted to make sure that I was there and could look back and say, yeah, I was there. And Harley Flanagan is going to play tonight as well. So, I mean, there's really no way I was going to be able to miss this thing.
Yeah, I wish I kind of could have flown back for it, but it's all right. All right, well, this is a debatable question. Best slice of pizza in Jersey?
Say it again?
Where can you get the best slice of pizza in Jersey?
Wow. Well,
it's a hard one.
That's a hard one. I mean, I am still in Bergen County, so I'm going to have to say the place that I go to, which is in, I think it's Paramus, is called Bella Roma.
Huh.
And they make a pretty damn good slice of pizza. It's like, probably for my money, Bella Roma, I think it's Paramus, is my favorite pizza.
Okay, nice. All right.
I'm sure somebody will argue.
Yeah, I've never tried that one. I usually
it's a little shop on like Farview Ave, like suburban Jersey. I mean, nobody would know this place, but it's a family run place that makes like really cool exotic pies. They try anything on a pie, and some of the slices are just incredible.
Oh, okay. My spot always was Bruno's in Clifton, right by where I used to grew up.
How long did you live in Jersey for?
Till I was 25.
Okay. And then you're in San Francisco now?
Yeah, East Bay, SF Bay Area. So
how old are you now,
it's a different world, but I dig it. So, yeah.
How old are you now, though?
What's that?
How old are you?
38.
Oh, okay. Young man.
I'm young. I'm a young man.
Young man, but supportive.
40, but I guess compared to you, right? Well, how old are you here?
Next week, I'm 48.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, happy birthday.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, but I still feel very young. So, I think as long as you keep a young mental attitude, your body will follow.
That's true. This is true. All right. Well, do you have any last words?
Just want to say thank you so much for giving a shit about me and the band and taking your time to, ask some questions and spread the word. It really means a lot to me. I mean, I don't take anything for granted these days. And, if anybody cares, then I'm very thankful for it. So all I can say is, if everybody would support hardcore, punk, rock, metal, and music in general as much as you do, we might have a scene again someday. So that's what I'm hoping for.
All right, great. Well, thanks a lot, Dave. Have a great time at the show.